This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
This is The Roger Stone Show.
Welcome. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network. This is where we talk politics, 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 and politics, as Mel Brooks said in his great movie, History of the World Part 1. If you haven't seen that and you want some laughs, I recommend it. I'm a hard-bitten political operative and a veteran of 13 national presidential campaigns, from Nixon to Reagan to Trump. I was never a Bush Republican, although I did do my duty in 2000 by going to Florida for the recount. There, in what is called by the left the Brooks Brothers riot, we successfully prevented Democrat election officials from recounting the same sheaf of ballots that had already been recounted 3 times after first attempting to remove them to a place where there were no reporters or observers, a violation of the state sunshine law. Had Al Gore asked for a recount in every county in Florida, he would have been president, I believe. I also worked on Capitol Hill as an assistant to Senator Bob Dole, who would have made a great president, one of the greatest men of the 20th century, and also Congressman Bob Steele from Connecticut, my very first job. So I've seen the sausage being made. I've seen a lot of presidential debates. Obviously, I've studied the debate between Nixon and Kennedy because I wrote 2 books on Richard Nixon. I've become a late admirer of John F. Kennedy, who was a fierce anti-communist, who wanted a silver-backed dollar, who, like Donald Trump, cut taxes across the board, lifting all boats. But what I saw in the debate the other night at ABC, much unlike the debate between, say, Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford, or Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, or even the debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, what I saw was a mugging, a 3-on-1 pile-on in which Donald Trump was aggressively fact-checked. The problem is most of those fact checks, as you will see today, were wrong, where there was no fact-checking of Kamala Harris. She told a number of whoppers. We're going to get into that, but there were also other tricks played. Donald Trump was given a shorter microphone stand, so he had to lean down to speak into it. We now know that they had special lighting which virtually blinded him, which is why he never looked at his opponent, nor you got any real reaction shots. They gave Kamala Harris a shorter podium so that she could look as tall as Trump in the 2 shot. Now, I had Robert Davi, the actor, on my show the other day. He's been here on the Roger Stone Show. I think it was just last weekend. And he said that he believed, based on Kamala Harris's performance, that she had memorized, like an actress, or maybe like a good attorney, her entire position, her entire presentation. Others, however, believe that there's some likelihood that she was given the questions, or at least an outline of them, in advance. Mark Penn, the very prominent Democrat pollster and pundit, who was a key figure in the re-election of President Bill Clinton, has called for an investigation because Kamala Harris's performance was so smooth, and a whistleblower has come forward to say in a sworn statement that the questions, and an assurance that there would be no follow-up questions, no so-called fact-checking, actually took place. Now, it did occur to me that Donna Brazile, who in 2016 worked at CNN, gave Hillary Clinton the questions for her debate with Donald Trump in advance. And where does Ms. Brazile work now? Well, that would be ABC. So it's a reasonable question. I agree with Mark Penn. There should be an investigation, but it was very clear that Kamala Harris's sorority sister and the other moderator piled on with a series of lies and falsehoods that are extraordinary, all the while saying that it's Donald Trump who lied. You see, that's the tactic. Well, let's take the biggest one, which is to say Donald Trump wants to cut taxes for billionaires. Let's be very clear. Like President John F. Kennedy, like President Ronald Reagan, the Trump tax cuts were across the board. In actuality, those who benefited the most from the Trump tax cuts were the middle class. People with a middle income between $15,000 and $50,000 had the greatest tax cut, which was between 16 and 26% in the first year alone, while the average tax cut for people in brackets that start at $1 million was less than 6%. An enormous lie. And then they keep saying Donald Trump wants a 20% sales tax. He's made no such proposal. What he has suggested is that we could raise tariffs on imports, which in turn would allow us to reduce taxes even further, perhaps even get rid of them entirely. This is an extraordinary example of the kind of lies that we saw that night. They also have claimed, of course, record job creation, 118,000 jobs they lay claim to. Of course, wait a minute, the Bureau of Labor Standards had to readjust those numbers. 413,000 of them were what Donald Trump in the debate called bounce back jobs, meaning jobs that were recovered after COVID. The majority of the jobs, by the way, are part-time jobs. They don't tell you that part either. And the truth is that Americans are working fewer hours per week. The other thing they don't tell you is that the average American is being so destroyed by inflation. The idea that inflation is caused by Donald Trump, pretty laughable. The truth of the matter is that by the time it is true that Kamala and Joe Biden inherited a 14.8% unemployment rate, but by the time Trump left office, he had actually already slashed it by over 6.4. In other words, the jobs were in fact coming back. Then, of course, there is the January 6th hoax, which she called the worst assault on democracy since the Civil War. Actually, hundreds of thousands died in the Civil War. Regardless of what she says, no, 3 police officers did not die on that day. 1 died of a stroke the following day, and 2 others committed suicide after the fact. But, of course, she didn't address the question of Ashley Babbitt. She was the unarmed U.S. Air Force veteran who was shot and killed without warning, without menacing anyone. It is extraordinary the way they continue to insist that no state allows a late-term abortion, when in fact there are at least 8 states which do not define any limit on abortion, could be performed at any time, and that there are 10,000 late-term abortions in the 8th or 9th month every single year. We're going to be fact-checking Kamala Harris ourselves right here on The Roger Stone Show, so don't go away because we'll be right back.
This is The Roger Stone Show. This is The Roger Stone Show.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network. We're talking, what else? Politics. Unfortunately, it's left to me to fact check the fact checkers because Well, Donald Trump was triple teamed. I still think he saved this debate and actually triumphed because of his strong clothes. Despite every dirty trick in the book, I would not recommend that the president debate again because, quite frankly, it was obvious that Kamala Harris had memorized every single word of her presentation. Actually, we know that because several days later, when she did a one-on-one interview, the first one, with an ABC affiliate in Philadelphia, when she was asked how she would bring prices down, she started talking about being born in a middle-class family and how the people in her neighborhood cared about how their lawns looked, all that were bits memorized from her debate presentation. This idea that Donald Trump, not Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, are responsible for the 40-year high inflation is an absurdity. Just the idea that everything is Donald Trump's fault, nothing, of course, is her fault. But in August of 2022, Vice President Harris actually voted twice to break the tie to pass the Biden administration's signature Inflation Reduction Act. The problem with that is that the Inflation Reduction Act was actually a Trojan horse of left-wing priorities that did nothing whatsoever to stem inflation. According to the Joint Committee on Taxation, the Inflation Reduction Act raised the tax burden on Americans making as little as $20,000 a year. Joe Biden, and this happens a lot when you have a dementia or advanced Alzheimer's, he blurted out the truth. Listen to this.
My investments, through my investments, the most significant climate change law ever, and by the way, it is a $369 billion bill. It's called we should have named it what it was, but at any rate.
So in other words, let me get this straight, the Inflation Reduction Act didn't decrease inflation. In fact, it fueled it because inflation is caused by spending. Everybody in the country knows that, but evidently not Kamala Harris. Then, of course, we had to recycle the suckers and losers canard. This is where General John Kelly, who had served as the president's chief of staff, insists that while visiting a cemetery in France, that Donald Trump looked at the graves of those brave men and women who had given their lives in their service in the country and called them suckers and losers. The problem is that there were 19 other people present, and none of them have any memory of Trump saying anything of the kind. The good general came up with this only after he was unceremoniously canned for insubordination. Great piece this past week that I read by Dr. Sebastian Gorka, who was there in the White House, who said that Kelly went insane anytime the president's speechwriters wanted to use the word Islamic extremists or Islamic radicals. You can see why he was fired, but the suckers and losers canard, it got recycled at the Democrat National Convention. It got recycled again in the debate. That's the thing about the left. It doesn't matter how debunked, disproven, or discredited any of their claims may be. Wait a few weeks, they'll come back and recycle them again. Of course, where would we be without Project 2025? Project 2025 is a 900-page policy document by the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank in Washington, D.C. Yes, it is absolutely true that some people who had worked for President Trump in the past worked on it. But that is not the president's platform. His platform is Agenda 27. Yet they come back to this point again and again. Here's why. For example, the Project 2025 agenda says that we should extend the age before one can get their Social Security benefits and also subject seniors to an examination of their income beyond their Social Security benefits. In other words, means testing. If they were making money, presumably there would be a cut in their benefits. Donald Trump is opposed to that. He has always been opposed to that. Since the time he got into politics, he has pledged that he would not change or cut Social Security, which he considers a sacred trust between those who paid into the system and those who now wish to retire and get their benefits. Let me put it another way. Claiming that Donald Trump's platform is Project 2025 would be like claiming that the U.S. Communist Party platform is the platform of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. They would deny it just as Donald Trump denies it. It's a smear. And then, of course, we had a go-round about fracking. Fracking is a process in which you drill into the earth in order to capture natural gas. Fracking technology has improved environmentally extraordinarily in the last 10 years, and the economies of upstate New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio rely heavily on fracking, as does the energy independence that we achieved under Donald Trump. Now, there is no question that Kamala Harris said that she would ban fracking. Now, suddenly, because Pennsylvania is a swing state, she says she won't ban fracking. Do you trust her? I do not. Just last week, President Donald Trump said that he would appoint a commission to look into the assassination attempts of American presidents. He would ask RFK to chair it. Mitch Hank, a veteran radio commentator and a recovered political operative like myself, is going to join me shortly to talk about that. I'm Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Network. Folks, go to the App Store right now and download the Red Apple app. That way you won't miss any of the great programming we have on the Red Apple Audio Network. If you love politics, well, the Roger Stone Show is the place to be. So check us out. Sure, I'm a partisan Republican, but I've had plenty of criticism for the Romneys and the McConnells and the Kevin McCarthys. I'm probably more of a libertarian these days, but I tell it to you straight. So if you're interested in the Kennedy assassination, Rich Hank, our next guest, is one of the most knowledgeable men in the country. I have done a number of debates on his show in the past, and we're going to delve into that momentarily. I am Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show. Don't go away, because we'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show. Now, it's time for Protecting Your Investments, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. Here's Roger Stone.
I'm Roger Stone, and this is Protecting Your Investments, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. In these turbulent times, with the current administration hurtling towards some kind of digital currency system and record inflation based on crazy runaway spending, many of my smartest friends are protecting their investments by investing in both gold and silver. ColonialMetalsGroup.com/stone is where you find them. The folks I trust are the folks at ColonialMetalsGroup.com, and they'll give you a free analysis of your current retirement vehicles and your portfolio and tell you how you can protect yourself in the coming economy. Joining me now, Mitch Hank is a veteran of all things media. He's enjoyed 16 years of TV, news, and sports in the South Bend and Green Bay area of Madison, Wisconsin, plus 14 years in talk radio in Madison. Tough market. Like me, he's a recovering political operative, having been a key aide and supporter of Gary Hart's presidential campaign and having worked for the Wisconsin Attorney General and Democrat Jim Doyle. These days, Mitch Hank currently hosts Mitch in the Morning at Oldies 101 WHBU in Anderson, Indiana. But the reason I invited him here today is because Mitch Hank is one of those knowledgeable people in the country when it comes to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. I've debated a number of folks whose views on the assassination are different than mine on Mitch's show, and it occurred to me that Mitch would be a great guy to have on today to talk about the most recent developments pertaining to the murder of John F. Kennedy. Mitch Hank, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Hello, Roger. Thanks for inviting me on. It's a pleasure.
Delighted to have you here. So, as you know, President Donald Trump initially indicated that he would declassify all of the information pertaining to the Kennedy assassination. At the last minute, while he did release about 80% of the remaining classified documents, he held back about 20%. Later said that he did so at the behest of CIA Director Mike Pompeo, who told him that release of those documents might expose the sources and methods of the agency. I asked him directly, Mr. President, what is it? And he says, it's so awful I can't tell you. Someday you'll know. Just to be clear, he told my good friend Judge Andrew Napolitano the exact same thing. Now, kick the ball back down the road. That decision under the JFK Assassinations Record Act goes to President Joe Biden. He releases a little bit more, but he holds back fundamental documents. Mitch, what do you think they're hiding from us?
Well, they held back the Ruby files, as I understand it, during Trump, and I was surprised by that because we certainly know more about that given recent books about the testimony at the Ruby trial itself, where you had the parking lot attendant or actually manager who heard Ruby on the phone saying, I'll be there, meaning the next day, which was in the garage when he killed Oswald. So, I mean, that was in the transcript of testimony in the Ruby trial, which a lot of people didn't see. But, there's so many things about this case that just piqued the interest, and I give you credit as one of the researchers on this and wrote the book when I first interviewed you on the case against LBJ, what motive means an opportunity and a voracious desire to be the president. Why else would he be VP in 1960, give up his majority leader post? He had his sights, but you also had people that had motive. I believe that rogue Joint Chiefs and rogue CIA, including the former director Alan Dulles, who Kennedy fired of the Bay of Pigs, and others conspired. They had motive. They were angry at him over the Bay of Pigs not doing air cover. They didn't do airstrikes after the pilot was shot. U-2 pilot shot during the missile crisis. People forget that. And then the atmospheric test ban treaty had heavy opposition among hawks in the military complex, industrial complex. So I think there was motive to get rid of. You had anti-Castro Cubans too. I mean, you had the likes of David Morales and others who hated Kennedy. They thought he betrayed them at the Bay of Pigs. So you had all kinds of motive. You had all kinds of people at high places connected. LBJ knew who the allies were. Hoover hated Kennedy. So, yeah, the backdrop, which you did so well and putting together in your book, gives us all the back. And there's so much physical evidence from Dallas. I'll stop now, but you and I both know so many clues on the car where LBJ was not seen, where Lady Bird and Senator Yarborough were waving, and you saw through the glass of the people in the crowd. That's because LBJ was already on the floor. You had that. You had Vicki Adams, who was recorded by the Warren Commission as saying she was on the back staircase at the book depository within 90 seconds of the shooting and was with a coworker and was seen by a supervisor. Her recorded interview is missing from the archives. There's no way Oswald could have been on that back staircase within 90 seconds, which is the time he would have needed to get to the second floor, where he was seen by an officer drinking a Coke and not out of breath. So, I mean, there are so many, and of course the doctors all said there was a grapefruit-sized hole in the back of JFK's head, and that was different from the doctors who observed him at the Bethesda autopsy. So you can see, Roger, what I don't like is the lack of curiosity by the press. The press fell asleep on this case. They were out to lunch. People like Mark Lane and others who questioned the Warren Commission were called crackpots, nutcases. The whole thing is shameful in my view.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pieces here. Let's unpack it. Jack Ruby, who the Warren Commission said had no known connections to organized crime, is in fact a button man for Carlos Marcello, first in Chicago. Then he goes to Havana to run one of Marcello's casinos, and he ends up at the Carousel Club, a gentleman's club, shall we call it, in Dallas, which was most likely, I believe, owned by Marcello. There is a great video. You can still find it on YouTube. Jack Ruby being led down a hallway in handcuffs by two police officers and reporters, many of whom Jack, of course, knew, saying, Jack, how could this happen? He said, look at the man at the top, the man at the very top. They say, Jack, what are you saying? He says, let me put it to you this way. If Adlai Stevenson had been vice president, none of this would have happened. Whereupon they silence him.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
So all of that is extraordinarily strange. You list a bunch of the anomalies. What's interesting to me is that even in the Gallup poll a couple of years ago, 63% of Americans still, despite the mainstream media pushing the Warren Commission canard, which at this point is virtually shredded, do not believe that Lee Harvey Oswald, who had no powder burns on his chest or his arms, according to the Dallas Police Department, had acted alone, shot Kennedy, 3 shots, all from the rear. And this recent Paramount Pictures documentary, which features the Parkland doctors, they now come forward and say they saw wounds in Jack Kennedy from the front and the back that were consistent with his being shot from the front and the back. But they were threatened at the time not to discuss it. There's so much here to unpack, you almost don't know where to start.
Well, Robert McClellan, one of the doctors in Trauma Room 1, went on Nova in 1988 and said that Boy Scout patch in the back of the head wasn't there, meaning that he saw a big gaping grapefruit-sized hole in the back of the head, but somehow at the autopsy there was this patch, which gives credence to the theory that the body was altered by surgical means, perhaps at Walter Reed. What's interesting, and you could just see the forensic fact that the body was put in a ceremonial bronze casket in Dallas and then it was retrieved in Bethesda in a red and gray working casket, and its body was in a body bag. That's pretty disturbing, which does give you the idea that the body was altered, which would go to McClellan's observation that patch was new. But obviously there was an effort to make the world know that the shots had come from the rear, when in Dallas, the doctors said the shots had come from the right temple and above the Adam's apple. And Dr. Perry, I believe, Malcolm Perry, was he the doctor in Dallas? He said to a friend years later, a surgeon in Seattle who had always said, hey, was that a rear wound or an exit wound? He didn't want to talk about it, but after a lengthy surgery, when he was very tired, the doctor came at him again and said, was that a exit wound or a entry wound? He said, without question, an entry wound.
All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Mitch Henk, who hosts Mitch in the Morning at WHBU in Anderson, Indiana. And we're talking about the unanswered questions yet today about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. I'm Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network, and we'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
It is interesting that the night before the motorcade in Fort Worth, LBJ, according to Jacqueline Kennedy's writings, went to Kennedy's suite to try to persuade him to switch so that Senator Yarborough, who was Johnson's archenemy, a progressive Texas Democrat, ride with the president, and that Governor John Connally ride in safety with the vice president, when John Kennedy said it defeated the entire purpose of his trip to Texas, which was to unite the two wings of the party and to be seen with the more conservative Connally, that Johnson pitched a fit and stormed out. When Jackie Kennedy said, "What was that all about?" President Kennedy said, "Well, that's just Lyndon being Lyndon."
Yes, and I think there's a broader historical perspective on Vietnam. Kennedy, before he went to Dallas, was sounding off because they had just 3 weeks before the head of South Vietnam, President Diem, and his brother, the head of the Secret Service, Secret Police, were both murdered. Kennedy had supported a coup, but he thought that Diem and his brother should be exiled to a different country. When he had word that they'd been murdered, Kennedy's face changed expressions, and he got up from the table and walked out. It really upset him. And Johnson had been collaborating as vice president with hawks and people that disagreed with Kennedy's policies. He told Mike Mansfield he wanted to come out by 65, be out of Vietnam. That was his goal, but he couldn't do it or Goldwater would kill him. Evelyn Lincoln, who was his personal secretary, told me directly that the weekend of Dallas, she was writing a memo to Mansfield and other friends about his desire to phase out, but couldn't do it until after the election. I knew Evelyn from the Gary Hart campaign where I met her. She came out to be one of my speakers. We had 2 different meals together, and she was a fascinating woman. She also told me that Kennedy told her that he wanted Terry Sanford on the ticket of North Carolina to replace Lyndon Johnson in 1964. I mean, she told me that directly. So, I mean, there was all, and you knew that yourself, so there was all kind of intrigue here. But the political ramifications of Vietnam, and that's huge. And I hate to compare the good ship monkey business to the assassination, but in Matt Bai's book about Gary Hart's demise, Hart told him at his kitchen table, if I'd won, there never would have been a George W. Bush. There never would have been an Iraq war, and the 5,000 people who are dead would be alive. And so that kind of stuff, whether it's a sex scandal or an assassination, history can change.
Well, yes, Evelyn Lincoln, Kennedy's personal secretary, actually on Air Force One, now with Lyndon Johnson as president, makes a list that's in her book of those she suspects of being involved in the murder, and she has the first suspect on that list being Lyndon Johnson himself. The point, of course, is that Johnson was facing 2 corruption investigations, the Billy Saul Estes investigation and the Bobby Baker investigation. It's interesting that Bobby Baker, who was the Secretary of the U.S. Senate and thought by many to be Johnson's bag man, the man you paid the bribes to, that is fully covered in Robert Caro's multi-volume Pulitzer Prize-winning biography. But go to the index and look up Billy Saul Estes. He's not there. Yeah, I went and checked, and there's more linear inches coverage of the Saul Estes scandal. Billy Saul Estes being a Texas wheeler dealer who is kicking back to Johnson, and who ultimately goes to prison, and then only after emerging from prison and after Johnson's death insists that he sat in the room where the murder of John F. Kennedy was openly plotted. An interesting side note there. I'm pretty excited about this announcement by President Trump. It's not just that he now says that if elected again, this time he will release all the documents, but that he has asked Robert Kennedy Jr. to head a commission that will study all presidential assassination attempts. Well, that would mean not only could examine the murder of his uncle, President John F. Kennedy, he could examine the murder of his father, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, who had served as Attorney General. He gives a compelling interview with Mike Tyson, of all people, in which he makes the case that Sirhan, the man convicted in that murder, is not, in fact, the killer. He would be allowed to look at the assassination of President Ronald Reagan, for which we have never gotten a full explanation, not even a formal report of the task force headed by Vice President George Bush. And, of course, he could now look at what happened most recently in Butler, Pennsylvania, where every week we seem to get more answers than questions. Most recently hearing that a majority of the people in President Trump's protected detail were not indeed Secret Service agents, but Department of Homeland Security employees who had had a 2-hour online executive protection training video shown to them.
Yeah, that was blatant negligence, and the American people are not satisfied with what happened there. I wonder if this new commissioner, RFK Jr. heads, would look into the Garfield killing, which would clear the Garfield assassin because the doctors killed Garfield with their treatment. So I don't know, I don't know how deep they're going to go. But no, you make great points. You've done great work on this, and I applaud you and the other heavy investigators who have done books on this. I just really am upset with the American press, this conformist, obedient press that didn't question authority, which I thought was the whole basis of the media, to question those in power. So at least you're doing it. Some of us are trying to keep it alive. Hopefully we'll have an answer at some point.
All right, Mitch Hank from Mitch in the Morning over there at WHBU in Anderson, Indiana, an old friend and a knowledgeable fellow. Thanks for joining us on the Roger Stone Show here at the Red Apple Network.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
Welcome back, folks. I have breaking news. I have just been informed that there have been shots fired in the area where President Donald Trump was playing golf at his West Palm Beach golf course. The police are seeking 2 men. They have confirmed that Trump was the intended target, but the good news so far is that the president is unharmed. That's all we know at this moment, but if we learn more, we will certainly bring it to you immediately. My guest now is Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama. Coach Tommy Tuberville spent 40 years in higher education as a college football coach, including stints at the University of Miami, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Texas Tech, and Cincinnati. In 1998, Coach Tuberville was named head coach at Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama, where I'm told they take football very seriously in Alabama. He coached for 11 years. He led the Auburn Tigers to 5 Western Division titles and 1 SEC championship, and he was named the 2004 National Coach of the Year. In 2016, after that season, Tommy Tuberville retired as one of the winningest coaches in football history, and right now, even today, he is on the ballot at the College Football Hall of Fame, to which I believe he most certainly deserves induction. But uncontent to sit on the sidelines giving out what's going on in the country, this non-politician decided to run for the U.S. Senate in his home state, came out of nowhere to win, and today he is on the front lines fighting for America. Senator, thank you so much for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger, for having me on. I was sad to what I just heard you say as we started out this conversation about shots at President Trump. I played golf with him many times at Mar-a-Lago and West Palm, and he's got huge brush hedges around the entire course, and also he has Secret Service everywhere. And so, but it's sad to see and hear that another attempt on his life, and it just goes to show you how crazy our country is turning.
It's deeply, deeply disturbing. I've kind of expected this. I've been praying against it. I've been urging my listeners to pray against it, to pray for the president's safety. Obviously, we need a lot more answers, but we still don't have enough answers regarding Butler, Pennsylvania. Learning this week that a Majority of those in the president's detail were not actually Secret Service employees, but indeed came from the Department of Homeland Security, where they'd had an only 2-hour tutorial online in executive protection. We know that the state, local, and Secret Service knew there was a man with a gun inside the perimeter for 92 minutes. He'd actually been seen using a range finder, yet no one informed the president or his immediate detail, and he wasn't evacuated as the Secret Service protocols would have required. It's very disturbing. The House Republicans have announced an investigation, but I see most of the facts being ferreted out by members like Corey Mills of Florida and Clay Higgins of Louisiana, and of course your colleague Senator Hawley, all of whom I think have been courageous in their independent efforts to get at the truth. Deeply, deeply disturbing. Well, Senator, I want to ask you, how do you like the U.S. Senate? It's got to be quite a change from what you did before. Here's what I observed when I worked on Capitol Hill. I now know the difference between a cactus and a caucus. You know the difference? In a cactus, all the pricks are on the outside.
That's a good one. I'll have to remember that, Roger, but you're exactly right. You know, I didn't know what to expect. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an educator. I spent all those years in coaching, but also education. And one of the reasons I ran, Roger, because I saw the last 15, 20 years how our kids are not being educated. They're being indoctrinated. I saw the things on hundreds and hundreds of transcripts that I'd go through every year as recruiting players. And I'd go into schools, high schools. There's no respect for the teachers anymore. It's just absolutely a shame. So when I got out, I didn't serve in the military. I barely missed Vietnam. My dad was career military, and I felt an emptiness. So I said, I'm going to run for an office. And so I ran for the U.S. Senate. I beat a sitting senator, a Democrat senator from Alabama, which I don't know how he ever got elected, but he did. And so I've been up there now 3.5 years, but I've been very disappointed, Roger. I really have. I've been disappointed in the things that we don't fight hard enough. We don't fight back. Our whole country is run by the mainstream media. We have a group of progressive communists on the left that are trying to control our country, trying to tear our Constitution down, invade our country with foreigners, take over our elections, and what do? They point to the Republicans and the true Americans in this country as the ones that are causing all the problems, which is totally wrong. So it's just absolutely amazing what I've seen since I've been up there 3.5 years.
Senator, here is some more details. CNN now reporting that the shots were in fact intended for President Trump. Authorities recovered a backpack with a GoPro camera and an AK-47. This contradicts earlier reporting that suggests that this gunfire between two individuals outside the club was not related to President Trump. And Brian Stelter of CNN, affectionately known as Mr. Potato Head, says that officials believe the shots fired at Trump International Golf Club were intended for former President Donald Trump, according to sources familiar on the matter. I salute Mr. Stelter in this case for promoting the truth. This is deeply, deeply disturbing. Again, we will bring you more as we know it. Senator, you have put a hold on the promotion of one of our current defense secretary's top military aides, who they have proposed making the commander of all U.S. Army forces in the Pacific. For those who don't know how the Senate works, a senator can put a hold on a nomination if he has a legitimate reason to do so. We're going to go to a break here in a minute, so we may not get your entire answer. We'll come back to it if we don't. But, Senator, why have you taken this action?
Well, there's several reasons, but the main one is what happened last summer, Roger, where basically this general was working with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. Lloyd Austin goes into the hospital for a week. Nobody knows it, but several of the generals around him who are supposed to communicate to the White House and let them know, the commander-in-chief, that, hey, we don't have anybody running the military right now. The Secretary of Defense is in the hospital. Total lack of communication. And I'm not going to give a blanket promotion to someone that obviously dropped the ball. Now, there's a review going on right now, an IG report. When we get that, we'll look at it. And if he's got anything to do with this and dropped the ball, there's no reason to give somebody a promotion that didn't do his job. It's all about merit, especially in the military. So that's one of the reasons. There will be several other reasons it might pop up.
All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Senator Tommy Tuberville, football legend and America First fighter for the taxpayers of Alabama, and we'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show. This is the Roger Stone Show.
Welcome back, folks. This is the Roger Stone Show. A slight update. We now have news that the Secret Service not only rushed President Donald Trump to safety, but they opened fire on the man they saw possessing an AK-47. Again, we will bring you news as we get it, but the good news is that President Donald Trump is unharmed. Thank you, Jesus. We're talking to Senator Tommy Tuberville, who very quickly got a reputation in Washington and in the country as a common sense conservative, a non-politician who came to the U.S. Senate from athletics rather than coming through the political chairs. And he's gotten a reputation for battling against government overreach, fighting for the unborn, and passionately supporting our nation's law enforcement and military. He is well situated on the Senate Armed Services Committee, the Agriculture Committee, the Veterans Affairs Committees, among others. I sleep better at night knowing that non-politicians like Tommy Tuberville are in the U.S. Senate. Senator, I read that we have just given an extraordinary new tranche of money to Ukraine for the war in Ukraine. I am increasingly skeptical that this war is winnable, but $700 million in new aid for our energy grid, which is interesting because just in the last week, a number of people like Kash Patel, the former chief of staff of the U.S. Defense Department, former national security assistant to President Donald Trump, have said that our own power grid is extraordinarily vulnerable to hacking, vulnerable potentially to attack by terrorists, vulnerable even to inclement weather, yet we're shipping $700 million to Ukraine. What is your thinking on this war at this point, Senator?
Well, first of all, we can all remember Barack Obama sending pallets and hundreds of millions of dollars over to the Afghanistanians that were sent over in the middle of the night, wrapped in plastic, and who knows where that money goes. Well, same thing's happening here. We're sending $700 million on pallets of cash to the Ukrainians, which I've not voted to send one dime over there. I know they can't win. This was all set up by Victoria Nuland, Barack Obama, all the people, these neocons that think that Ukraine can beat Russia. The problem we're having now, after getting 500,000 or 600,000 Ukrainians killed, is they're about to start a world war. Now Joe Biden and Blinken, these people that I don't know what they think they're doing, but they're allowing the Ukrainians to shoot long-range missiles into Russia, and Vladimir Putin's not going to put up with that very long. But no, our foreign policies right now are just going every which way. We're looking down the barrel of a gun, Roger, with a lot of different things. Been on the Armed Services Committee. I see a lot of this going on. But again, as you said, our power grid needs work. Our water systems need work. We are cutting back on oil and gas production. It's a travesty of what the Biden administration's done to this country. It's making us poor and poorer and making the other countries like Iran, Venezuela, Russia, making them richer and richer. And I don't know, that it seems to me like that's the plan of the Kamala Harris, Biden, and Obama regime, and they're putting us all in harm's way.
Well, Coach, you anticipated my next question. I mean, it seems rather clear that that Secretary Antony Blinken, who's about as good at statecraft as he is at playing the guitar, which is to say not very good, has announced that we've told NATO and the Ukrainians that it is acceptable to use U.S. long-range missiles to hit targets deep inside Russia, whereas Vladimir Putin has said that would be an act of war. That would cross a line. We are skating closer and closer to World War III, and it's not just in this theater. I mean, Donald Trump had the Iranians kind of right where he wanted them. They were broke. The sanctions he put on them were so strict, so harsh, even the Chinese would not buy oil from them, which meant that they had no money to finance their nuclear weapons development program, no money to subsidize terrorism by Hamas and Hezbollah, no money, therefore, to finance the attacks on Israel. The idea of rearming, of unfreezing $190 billion in assets for the Iranians, who, before they get the money, promise they'll use it for humanitarian purposes, and after they get the money, say, hey, this is our money. We'll do anything we want with it, we like. What kind of foreign policy is this? It just makes very little sense to me.
It's insane. Like I said, we're making our enemies richer. We're making our allies poor. We're not standing behind our allies. Again, this Ukraine-Russia war shouldn't be going on. There's not one person in this administration, the Biden, Kamala Harris administration, that knows how to negotiate anything. They're afraid to talk to Vladimir Putin. But they will stand back and let the Ukrainians get killed, destroy their country, and at the end of the day, they're going to have to negotiate. President Trump will get us out of it once he gets elected, but there's a lot of water underneath the bridge between now and January the 20th, and there's a lot more people going to get killed, and I'm really worried about Vladimir Putin turning back and turning his guns back against more people and more NATO countries, just for the simple fact of what Biden and Kamala Harris are doing of sending and shooting missiles from Ukraine into Russia. It makes no sense.
Well, and the great ironies, of course, is that in the debate, she claimed that Putin was encouraged in his move on Ukraine by Donald Trump, when in fact it was made very clear to him by President Trump that he shouldn't dare move on Ukraine. That was Donald Trump who gave Javelin missiles to the Ukrainians to fight Russia, whereas Barack Obama gave them blankets, all the blankets they needed. It is absolutely clear that the strength and unpredictability of Donald Trump kept us out of war, kept the world out of war. But we're looking at Armageddon, and of course these folks know there's an election. They may think that the American people would rally around the president in time of war. So perhaps there's a political motive. I loved President Trump's answer when he was asked in the debate, who do you want to win? Do you want the Ukrainians to win? And he said, I want the killing to stop. So Donald Trump is the peace candidate in this race. I actually believe him when he says this matter could be resolved relatively quickly. Joe Biden himself said in the beginning he would have been willing to give them the Donbass. Said it himself. So, Coach, I want to thank you for joining us. By the way, I understand you have a birthday coming up Wednesday. You'll still be younger than me, but happy birthday, Senator. God bless you, and thank you for everything you're doing for America.
God bless you, Roger. Thank you.
This is The Roger Stone Show.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is one of the funniest men on the planet, Rob Schneider is one of the nation's most prominent entertainers and comedians. You remember him well from not only his stand-up comedy career, but also as a cast member and writer for the famous NBC sketch comedy series Saturday Night Live from 1988 to 1994. Now, in a business in which entertainers speaking out about their beliefs on the key public issues of the day can often hurt one's career, Rob Schneider has been an outspoken advocate for freedom against censorship, against war. And last time he was on our show, he was an articulate advocate for the candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. At the time, of course, I was and still am supporting my friend of 45 years, Donald Trump. Much has happened since then, so I am pleased to have Rob Schneider join us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Hey, Roger. How are you, my friend? Thank you for having me on.
I'm really delighted that you could be here. My nephew's favorite movie of all time is Deuce Bigalow, Male Gigolo. Therefore, I think I've seen it like 27 times. Whenever I ask him he's 11 years old. Whenever I ask him what movie he wants to see, that's what he picks. You've had a great career, and you're just warming up. But where I admire you is the fact that you have really been outspoken. Let's start in the most important place, because we're both interested in saving this country. Last year, as I indicated, you endorsed then independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for president, a man that I absolutely admire for his truth-telling, whether it's on health freedom issues, against censorship, about the insanity that our country is hurtling towards world war, and his commitment to fighting childhood chronic disease, which is caused by the poisoning of the food we are eating. So what is your perspective on Robert Kennedy's decision to put aside his personal ambition, put aside his personal ego, and do what he decided was best for the country, and to join the Trump train?
I think there was no other choice for Robert Kennedy. I mean, it really was. If you look at what the Democratic Party has said and what they really do, they talk about saving democracy, but look what they've done. In 2016, Bernie Sanders was the front runner, and the supermajority of Democrats overruled the majority of Democratic superdelegates and kicked out Bernie because they wanted to put in their candidate who they had handpicked and who they didn't want the people to decide, which was Hillary Clinton. Then cut to 4 years later, 2020, they did the same thing again. They got all the candidates, Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, to drop out and throw their weight behind the candidate that they handpicked, Joe Biden, who had lost the first one or the first two, I believe, primaries. And then once again, they had 14 million people vote this year, 2024, for Joe Biden. And that, of course, doesn't matter to the Democratic Party. They just anoint the one that they want, and they kicked out Joe Biden when they realized that, people have discovered that they were lying the whole time, that the cognitive problems that he had been going on this whole presidency, of course, since his time was when he was running for president, hiding in the bunker. So I think it's been exposed, and I think people know that this is this is no longer the Democratic Party that was of Robert Kennedy's father and his uncle John F. Kennedy. So we have really a group of people that we don't know who is running, who's actually running this country, because it hasn't been Joe Biden. So who is it really? Is it Obama? Is it somebody? Is it a group of people? But we know one thing for sure, that they worked, the Biden administration, Biden-Harris, had worked, and thank God for Elon Musk, that they were able to expose that they had violated the First Amendments of the United States. They violated Americans' First Amendment rights to free speech and silenced doctors, Americans, scientists who went against their the government narrative. That's been a fact. And they said, instead of kind of repositioning themselves and saying, and saying, let's correct this. In the Senate hearings, they attacked the whistleblowers, Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi. So you're not having this. There's no longer a Democratic Party. It's a blue monster. And Robert Kennedy recognizes this. Tulsi Gabbard recognizes this. These are like lifelong Democrats. They realize that the party of the people now, and the opportunity to continue to expand on being a party of the people, is the Republican Party. And I think it's been pretty obvious to most people who really are objective about what's happening in this country and the real threat, which is coming from the Democratic Party.
I'm very, very excited because I think the endorsement of Donald Trump by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and by Tulsi Gabbard, of whom I'm a huge fan, has been on the show here. We set the stage for a realignment in this country, for a new unity party, a party of common sense, a party that would like to avoid war, a party that understands the dangers of censorship, and a party who will examine the process by which pharmaceutical drugs get approved, the safety of our food. I think Robert Kennedy brings a vital agenda to the table, and President Trump has made it very clear that he is open to that agenda. He embraces that agenda. I'd like to see Robert Kennedy in a high-level position in a Trump administration. There's been no quid pro quo, but I think this has been an enormously selfless act. You're right. The viciousness by which the Democrat Party went first during the Democrat process to kneecap Bobby Kennedy, to cancel the Iowa caucuses, to penalize the New Hampshire Democrat Party if they held their traditional primary, to tell RFK that if he competed in Georgia, that he would not be allowed in the ballot in other primary states, and then to turn around and do the exact same thing when he sought to get on the ballot as an independent, which has always been a difficult, expensive, arcane, complicated process subject to legal challenge, because the rules pertaining to getting on the ballot are written by Republicans and Democrats working together to make sure that they have no competition. And the way he was treated was a disgrace. But then on the other hand, the party of his uncle and his sainted father no longer exists. I mean, the Kennedys were fierce anti-communists. They strongly favored tax reduction on working people and across the board to spur the economy. They wanted a strong national defense, not so we could go around the world looking for war, but so that we could ward off those who might be thinking twice about taking on the United States. The precept of peace through strength. Dwight Eisenhower passes a very sound principle to John Kennedy. And of course, there was as well his deep suspicion about our intelligence agencies and the deep state. This is a historic opportunity. You now have Robert Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard going on the road in the Reclaim America tour, the subtext of which is Make America Healthy Again. They had their first event yesterday in Arizona. I believe they're in Las Vegas next weekend. There's a sea change coming, Rob. I really think there is.
I hope so, and I believe it's happening. I think that I just want what we need to have two political parties. That's all we get. And if you remember, Roger, I know you do, when Robert Buchanan tried to, Pat Buchanan tried to have a viable third party run in the early 90s, and that was really squelched as well. And it was squelched that time by the Republican Party. So they really have a grip on power, and they don't want, both these parties do not want any, they'll accept someone who they don't like, but someone who questions that authority, someone who questions the establishment. That's why they hate Trump so much, that because he is a threat. I don't know how big of a threat, because I don't think he's that outrageous, but just the fact that he wants to stop these forever wars and stop that, the Democratic Party, and Biden has said specifically, we're just taking the money. It's not really going to Ukraine. It's just going down the street. But as long as congressmen as long as senators are allowed to invest in those companies like Raytheon, which benefits from these forever wars, and that they benefit from their tax dollars, like Nancy Pelosi would benefit from her investments in the military-industrial complex. That is not acceptable in our republic. They need to have a firewall there, and we really need to put a stop to this. We need to have. I mean, the thing that I really admire about Robert Kennedy is to being able to put party aside and what he has risked himself, his relations with his own family, is to realize and to come forward with a real problem in America is that our regulatory boards are captured. How much more of our country can be captured? We have obviously the media is captured. And you can see that that the ABC News moderators were favored and didn't fact check Kamala Harris once. I mean, you have the tech companies, which Facebook admitted that they worked with the Biden-Harris administration to censor Americans. You have the health regulatory boards, and you have the FDA and the CDC that are really controlled by the industry they're meant to regulate. Whether it's the different pharmaceutical industries, which are owned by BlackRock, State Street, and is it Vanguard? I believe it's called. And we need, as Americans, to put a firewall against industry so that we could do what these agencies are meant to do. They are meant to protect Americans and to not be infiltrated in this revolving door between industry and our regulatory boards. And then we have the Department of Education. That is, we do not need a Department of Education. Education in our republic needs to be completely controlled by the states. We cannot have a continuing, an enlarging influence from the federal education for our states. The states need to decide what the states do for their education. And the current plan is, hopefully they won't get elected again, but if the Democrats get back in, they want to double the amount of federal funds that go to the school districts. Now, if you're lucky enough to get your kid to go to private school, God bless you. But most people are going to be educated in the public school system. So while you and your kids are lucky that maybe they're not being indoctrinated into, which bathroom to use, not knowing which one, or, sports being the refuge for failed narcissistic male athletes ending up in girls' sports, they need to not have more money poured into that system so that the school boards won't matter and that they will be told what to teach. And that'll come from this Board of Education. That'll come from the Department of Education at the federal level. That is a real danger. I don't think people get. And if you take a look now, no matter what we do, no matter who wins this election, we have Secretary Blinken, and for him to approve missiles going deep into Russia, this is an unacceptable danger. That is the greatest danger to the world since the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. And I think people need to wake up, and if you're going to protest over something, if you're going to get in the streets for preventing World War III. This is a dangerous, dangerous neocon administration. They want a one-world government. And unfortunately, they're so foolish that they believe they're the ones that are going to be in control of it, when it's not. It's going to be China. And these
all right,
people,
folks.
The Maoist regime of that Marxist Kamala Harris will put into place is a real threat to our republic that I have not seen in my lifetime.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to my favorite comedian, Rob Schneider, and we'll be right back.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTIX or Cosentix.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentix.
This is your before and after story. Instead of imagining a rewarding career in medical imaging, Southeastern College can actually take you there. Prepare for a career in ultrasound, radiology, and X-ray technology with hands-on specialized training, simulations, and real-life experience with the latest imaging technology. You'll be ready to play a vital role on any healthcare team. Transform your life by helping others. Southeastern College. Your future is bright. Visit scc.edu to get started.
This is The Roger Stone Show. This is The Roger Stone Show.
Welcome back. This is The Roger Stone Show. I'm talking to comedian Rob Schneider. Rob, I'm really happy to see that RFK and Tulsi Gabbard are going to hit the road for the Trump campaign, recognizing that this is bigger than party, that this is indeed an effort to reclaim America. Meanwhile, as you've correctly pointed out, the country teeters on the brink of World War III. We read only in the last 48 hours that Secretary of State Blinken says that he has told NATO that, yes, they can use U.S. long-range missiles to hit targets deep in Russia. Vladimir Putin has said that that is a line in the sand for him that he will not allow to be crossed. This is, for anyone paying attention, I think that we should be petrified. I think you are absolutely right. And, of course, a war before the election would perhaps under the War Powers Act even give those running the election an excuse to postpone or cancel the election, particularly if they think Donald Trump, with the support of RFK and Tulsi Gabbard and J.D. Vance, is going to win. So I think these are precarious times. I do want to talk to you for a minute about censorship because one RFK made what had to be a very wrenching decision because he worked extraordinarily hard. He was an exemplary candidate. I was impressed by the fact that every time I saw him in an interview, not once ever did he make an assertion that he could not back up with a study and documentation that was credible. So the effort by CNN and others to try to denigrate him as a conspiracy theorist or some kind of kook, not once did I ever hear him say something that or take a view that he could not fully and articulately defend.
What you have, Roger, is you have someone like Robert Kennedy who's evidence-based in his thinking and his decisions. And then you have organizations like CNN, ABC, and all the captured liberal media, and that's what they really are, captured liberal media, that are an out branch of the Democratic Party. And they won't talk to, and they won't point to evidence. What they will do is they just go after truth hating. That's the term for it. Is they won't debate, they won't discuss, they won't show evidence. So when you show something, they just go after the truth tellers, and it is truth hating. I don't know what else to call it. I think James Lindsay, my friend, is the brilliant professor, and he's from New Discourses. He's really an exemplary scholar, and he really has to explain it that way. We have to go back to an evidence-based decision-making, because what we have now, we have a group of people that just are not looking at the truth, and they don't want the truth. They will just completely obscure things to the point where people are just confused. And I think that's what they want. I think that the people allowing 11 to 20 million people in across the border, stacking certain, whether it's Haitians in one particular place, thousands of them, it's to cause so much chaos that people are willing, in hopes of getting some sort of calm and peace, they're willing to give up their liberties. And I think this chaos is intentional. And I've never seen anything like this. And I'm not one of these people who is a fearmonger or trying to create more fear. You have to see this for what this is. This is really an attack on America. This is an attack on Western civilization. They really, really want to create enough voters coming into different states so that there won't be, you'll have a California in every state, which are cities that are overrun, cities that where you're going to have attorney generals that don't prosecute for crimes, and you have a mess, such a mess that people will be willing to give up their freedoms just for some form of calm. And I think that is very intentional. That's why this election to me is so important. We have to kick these people out so we can get some, they need to lose the election. They need to lose 3 different presidential elections, just like what happened, 2 Reagans and 1 Bush, so that they would end up coming back like what happened with Bill Clinton. He was a Republican light. Remember pro-death penalty Bill Clinton? I mean, that's the kind of thing. They need to regroup. They've had too much power for too long. They can no longer continue to blame the Republicans when they've been in control of the government for this many years. So I think enough people will wake up. It's just, will they be able to, control the ballot boxes? Will they be able to, show up at 3 o'clock in the morning with another van load of ballots again? I mean, how much will the American people allow at this point, Roger?
I'm afraid we are out of time. Folks, if you want to keep a track of where you can see Rob Schneider and his tour, go to robschneider.com. He also has an upcoming book on free speech entitled You Can Do It, Speak Your Mind, America. You can get that by going to hachetteBookGroup.com. Rob Schneider, thank you so much for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger. All the best, buddy. Take care.
Comments to speak on behalf of President Trump and other Republicans on the ballot. Now your forecast from the Ramsey Mazda Weather Center tonight. Mostly clear with a low of 59. Tomorrow, sunny with a high of 77. It's 75 and sunny outside our Midtown studios. I'm Liz Radabali. Remember, the news never stops at WABCRadio.com.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome, folks. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC, the most dynamic, influential AM radio station in the United States. I'm particularly proud to be on 77 WABC because I grew up listening to Cousin Brucey and Harry Harrison and so many of the greats at 77 WABC. I remember canoodling with my girlfriend in high school in the back of my 1965 yellow Volkswagen Bug convertible, listening to one of the greatest stations in New York and American history. Pleased and honored to be in the 77 WABC family. For the next hour, we're going to be talking politics and one big movie review, but we're also going to be taking your calls. That number, 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222, whether it's politics, history, news, food, whatever you want to talk about, we're going to be open to your calls. So you're going to want to get in the queue. We're going to get to as many of your calls as we possibly can. People asked me this morning at church what's going to happen in the presidential race. I look at the polls across the board. It's a mistake to focus on any one particular poll. Polling, of course, can be affected by the sample size, the accuracy of the sample, and whether it has the reflective number of Republicans, Democrats, independents, men, women, and so on, the wording of the questions, the order of the questions. Not all polls are the same, but the pollster I respect most in the country, Tony Fabrizio, proud son of the Queen of Queens and who cut his teeth in Long Island and New York City politics, comes up after allowing a reasonable number of days after the debate, showing that President Trump leading nationally by 3 and leading narrowly, but with a lead in every swing state. Now, Fabrizio, yes, he polls for the Trump campaign, but he also polls for the Wall Street Journal. He's very hard-nosed and I think very conservative. I mean, conservative in his methodology, seeking not to produce polls that show him what he wants to see, but polls that indicate where the race is. Now, I think this gets fought out as both candidates seek to define each other. Kamala Harris intends to try to pose as some kind of moderate who would bring us together, a unifying figure, when her actual record is nothing of the kind. Whether it is the border, whether it is defunding the police, whether it is her record on fracking across the board, whether it is her record on the Second Amendment, folks, she isn't who she tells you she is. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. I do want to tell you that after last Sunday's show, having done several different interviews that day, earlier the day, for podcasts online and so on, I had a touch of laryngitis last Monday, so I decided to take my wife, Nidia, who I met while working as the Northeastern political director for Ronald Reagan's 1980 presidential campaign, where she had worked as the campaign photographer, to see the new movie Reagan, starring Dennis Quaid and produced by Mark Joseph. I must tell you, folks, this has turned out to be an extraordinarily entertaining and emotional experience for both my wife and I. This extraordinary film actually manages to capture President Ronald Reagan's ebullient optimism, his ardent anti-communism, and his deep-seated conservative principles. This was the Reagan I knew, the Reagan I spent substantial time with, having worked for him in 3 presidential campaigns, 1976, 1980, and then his reelection in 1984. The movie is actually seen through the eyes of a retired KGB agent played by John Voight. The film is stunningly accurate regarding the Gipper's career path from radio to B movie actor to president of the Screen Actors Guild, where he did indeed fight the attempted communist takeover in Hollywood, to the unlikely governorship, and then finally to the presidency of the United States. Having known and spent substantial time with President Reagan, I must say that Dennis Quaid really manages to capture Ronald Reagan's genial nature, his athleticism, his love of the outdoors, his optimism, and his stubborn resistance to those in his own State Department who urged him to drop his hard line against the Soviets in the interests of détente. I also have to say that while the movie casts a number of the key Reagan staffers like Judge William P. Clark, Reagan's body man Mike Deaver, his counsel Edwin Meese, who very recently filed an amicus brief with the U.S. Supreme Court, arguing that the appointment of special counsel Jack Smith is unconstitutional on several grounds, that Smith was never confirmed by the U.S. Senate. Smith is not a sitting U.S. attorney, and there cannot be an executive branch employee or appointee who cannot be fired by the president. It's unconstitutional. I would like to have seen some of the other figures, like Ronald Reagan's rumpled press secretary Lynn Nofziger, Reagan's Rasputin-like campaign manager John Sears, but they were kind of airbrushed out of the narrative. I first joined the Reagan entourage myself as the National Director of Youth for Reagan. That was in his 1976 campaign, where we challenged President Gerald Ford for renomination, and then, of course, rejoining Governor Reagan's staff for his 1980 presidential bid, serving as the regional political director that gave me responsibilities for New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. It's when I learned that Brooklyn had some of the greatest pizza on the face of the earth. And then, of course, I reprised that role in 1984 when they added Ohio to my portfolio. That was actually President Richard Nixon's idea. He told Paul Laxalt and Ed Rollins, who were running the Reagan campaign, that if you just took Ohio off the board, if you denied Walter Mondale Ohio, there was no way he could win. Give it to Stone, Nixon said, and indeed they did. While the movie is historically accurate, I do wish there had been greater focus on Reagan's, I guess I would call it, seminal 1976 bid to replace President Ford, in which the former California governor laid the groundwork for Reagan's utter destruction of former Ambassador George H.W. Bush in 1980 and his ultimate nomination and election as president that year. Some will remember this, but there were those who believed that Reagan was too old to run again in 1980, that it had passed him by. He proved that to be entirely wrong. I guess the film could also have benefited by including important characters in Reagan's rise, like Senator Paul Laxalt of Nevada, who valiantly was the only member of the U.S. Senate in 1976 to support Reagan, chairing his campaign, chairing it again in 1980, and also the mercurial, mysterious, aforementioned John P. Sears. Another very cool touch in the movie Reagan, which I highly commend it to you, in theaters now, was the portrayal by former teen idol Pat Boone, who plays an evangelical minister as the film addresses the importance of the rise of the religious right in Reagan's ascendancy. Actor, singer, producer, director Robert Davi, who was on this show only a week ago, excels in a small but very pungent role as the Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev. This biopicture briefly uses kind of a cool Oliver Stone technique where they feature this collage of anti-Reagan pop art created during the anti-war student movement uprising at Berkeley. That was kind of a cool touch at all. And while the film does address Iran-Contra, this is where I think there are some issues regarding the accuracy. Because you see, the film actually fails to put responsibility on the entire Iran-Contra where it firmly belongs. That would be on Vice President George Bush and Reagan's CIA Director William Bill Casey, who, the hearings later showed, fashioned the illegal arms deal that would fund the Nicaraguan Contra rebels fighting the Sandinistas after the U.S. Congress cut off funding for that activity with the passage of the Boland Amendment. It has never actually been established that this illicit scheme, helmed by Bush and Casey and executed by Colonel Oliver North, was actually carried out with Reagan's knowledge, but Reagan did the right thing by taking responsibility because it happened on his watch, and therefore the lip chopping on the left that they would remove Reagan the way they did Nixon fell short, and Reagan continued his successful term. It's interesting that Bush's toady biography, John Meacham, fails to mention in his prize-winning biography of Bush that then Vice President Bush refused to cooperate with the special counsel's investigation of the Iran-Contra scandal, refused to testify, refused to turn over any of the records. Those seeking to burnish Bush's reputation at the expense of Reagan have airbrushed this inconvenient fact from history, as well as Bush's role overseeing the trafficking of millions of dollars worth of cocaine into Mena, Arkansas, where a compliant Governor Bill Clinton was bribed to look the other way, and what has now been documented as the CIA's illegal drug-running operation designed to raise additional off-the-books cash for the Nicaraguan Contras. The CIA lawyer overseeing this illegal drug smuggling operation, well, that would be future Trump Attorney General William P. Barr. Friends who had seen the movie warned me about its powerful and emotional ending, in which the ever-protective Nancy Reagan, who was played by Penelope Ann Miller quite effectively, declines to tell Ronald Reagan that because of the concerns about his age and retirement, that he would no longer be allowed to ride a horse. Reagan had famously said, "There's nothing so good for the inside of a man than the outside of a horse." And that unpleasant task fell to Secret Service agent John Barletta, who was effectively played in the film by Trevor Donovan. This is first-rate filmmaking, folks. I cannot recommend it cannot recommend it to you strongly enough. You know, as the film ended and the extensive credits began to roll, my wife and I, who were in a virtually empty theater, sat in silence as we both sought to hold back our tears for one of America's greatest presidents. If you love your country, if you loved Ronald Reagan, see this movie, Reagan. The left has tried with some success to rewrite history by downgrading Reagan's successful year presidency, in which his across-the-board tax cuts created one of the greatest economic booms in our history, where he rebuilt the America's national defense, outpacing the Soviets in an arms built-up that would ultimately cause the Iron Curtain to fall. I'm Roger Stone. You're with me here on The Roger Stone Show. We're going to be taking your calls shortly at 800-848-9222, and we'll be right back.
It's The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back, folks. This is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio. We are the crown jewel of AM radio. So I ask you to go now to the App Store on your cell phone and download the 77 WABC app. That way you won't miss any of the great entertainment or talk here on the most dynamic and influential AM radio station in the entire United States. You don't want to miss any of it, folks, so please download that to your phone. That way, if you can't tune in on any particular show, you can always go back later and listen to the great programming, whether it is my good friend Sid Rosenberg, whether it is my old colleague Larry Kudlow, Frank Morano After Midnight, the great Dominic Carter, Curtis Sliwa. There are so many here that I love. Cindy Adams, a friend of mine of 45 years. Only one place you can hear them, folks, right here, 77 WABC. So what's going on with Joe Biden? I mean, I said on this show that Joe Biden was extremely angry because he didn't choose to get out of the race for president. He was forced out of the race for president. He had every intention of running. I had a high-level Democrat source tell me the Friday before he dropped that he would withdraw from the race by letter on Sunday afternoon. I saw on Saturday where he was quoted yet again as saying he had no intention of getting out of the race. And then Sunday, indeed, in a very strange letter, which did not appear on White House letterhead, and where the signature doesn't really look like his, he withdrew from the race. Barack Obama orchestrated the decapitation politically of Joe Biden. They cut off his money. They got George Clooney to do an op-ed for the New York Times telling Joe it was time to go. I think it was Barack Obama. I know it was Barack Obama who lined up Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, key factors in Joe's ultimately being pushed from the race. But then adding insult to injury, I mean, having a sitting president of the United States cool his heels until after midnight, out of prime time, to give his farewell address to the party in which he won 14 million votes, 71%, only to be replaced by a candidate for whom, well, nobody has voted. No Democrat primary or caucus voter voted to nominate Kamala Harris. She is the candidate of the bosses. And then to have Joe Biden leave the convention early, not even be present when his vice president was nominated, well, that may have been an insult too far. My sources tell me that First Lady Jill Biden is declining to campaign for the Kamala Harris Tim Walz ticket. And then we had this very strange event this past week in which Joe Biden seems to have good-naturedly put on a Trump hat. Then there's a picture of President Biden posing with a group of about, 15, maybe 20 young people, kids, all wearing Trump T-shirts with a huge grin on his face. And of course, everybody saw him going up the stairs to Air Force One, and he was carrying a red hat. You couldn't really tell whether it was a MAGA hat, but I think most people got the inference. So what is Joe up to? Perhaps, just perhaps, he is saying to the Democrat Party, if you thought you were dumping me and I would go so quietly, well, you're wrong about that. We're going to be watching that very closely. Interestingly, a story in the New York Times a couple of days ago where President Richard Nixon, who of course started the war on drugs, said privately that he thought that pot, meaning marijuana, was not particularly dangerous. It's amazing how some of these Watergate-era tapes that include Richard Nixon are accentuated by history, and others seem to have disappeared. Wasn't that long ago that Tucker Carlson featured an actual audio, which I dug up, was reported by Politico, in which President Nixon, in the throes of Watergate, meeting with the CIA Director Richard Helms, basically trying to leverage Helms for help in the Watergate disaster, says to him, look, there's a lot of dirty business over there at the agency, and you can count on me to keep my mouth shut. And Helms plays dumb and says, I don't know what you're talking about. President Nixon says, well, let me put it this way. I know who shot John. There it is, folks. You can go to my Substack or go to Tucker Carlson's report on this. And it's true. The point, of course, is that under Richard Nixon, the war on drugs was focused at drug kingpins, at drug cartels by major drug traffickers. It was actually Joe Biden who drafted the 1994 crime bill, which is the first time we have the required mandatory penalties for the first time nonviolent crime of possession of small amounts of drugs for personal use. This has been a boon for the prison industrial complex, but people who are not violent criminals, people who had no previous criminal records, people who belong in drug treatment rather than in incarceration, thousands and thousands of African Americans and poor people have been incarcerated. That bill, by the way, was not only written by Joe Biden, but it was signed by Bill Clinton. That's the same Bill Clinton, by the way, went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, arguing that the Arkansas State Police should be allowed to conduct in racial profiling in pulling over drivers. It's amazing what you learn if you don't accept the established history of the establishment. I thought those revelations are very interesting. It's interesting also to me that in this particular presidential race, President Donald Trump has recently endorsed Amendment 3 in his home state of Florida, which is the legalization of cannabis, making several arguments. First and foremost, since Florida has a medicinal marijuana law passed by constitutional amendment, it makes no sense to have a federal law say that possession of marijuana is illegal while state law says that it is not. Also, I think a number of the president's personal friends who are older have told him that it has had great medicinal value for them, and that the state's medicinal marijuana system is cumbersome, bureaucratic, expensive, extremely limited and restricted in terms of what illnesses it covers. So it is Trump who has taken, I think, a bold stand, making it clear also that the constitutional amendment requires the legislature to strictly regulate this legalized cannabis, meaning you could not smoke it outside. So if you're sick of your neighborhood, New York, stinking like weed, well, that wouldn't happen in Florida if Amendment 3 passed. Gives the legislature full authority to regulate cannabis. Now, this is significant because Kamala Harris and Joe Biden claimed that they pardoned thousands of people for federal marijuana-related convictions, but when you actually check, you find out that not a single person was sprung from prison under their claims. I continue to be surprised that Barack Obama, when he had both houses of Congress, did not at least deschedule or reschedule cannabis, but that hasn't happened. In the meantime, it was President Donald Trump who, in the Farm Bill during his administration, legalized hemp. Hemp has become a multi-million-dollar job-creating industry, generating over $345 million in revenues. Hemp can be used for a broad cross-section of purposes, like making plastics, making concrete, making cloth, but yes, it does also have a recreational use. You've seen these Delta 8 products. There is an argument now in the Congress that hemp should be regulated further, but I think that is coming largely from their major competitor in the legal marijuana community. It is interesting also, though, that his position here in Florida, a state that I think will be closer than most people think, is going to help Trump bring younger voters, libertarian voters, independent voters. We also have as the backdrop Amendment 4, which pertains to abortion. It would make abortion legal at any time right up until the time of birth. It puts no restriction on it. It also avoids the 6 weeks requirement put forward by Governor Ron DeSantis, which even President Trump, who is pro-life, finds objectionable. And of course, Trump has taken the same position as President Ronald Reagan for life and the life of the mother, rape, incest, and the life of the mother. So in a way, I think these two ballot initiatives, in what will be a much closer than expected swing state, Florida, may balance each other out. We shall see about that. They continue to distort President Donald Trump's position. Once again, Kamala Harris saying in the debate that Trump would sign a federal abortion ban. He's made it very clear that he would not. In fact, it is a Trump administration legacy in the court that put it back in the states where the states can regulate it. No, sorry, Kamala, he's not against IVF, the fertility process. He thinks it ought to either be required that insurance companies cover it or that the government provide it. And no, he's not going to outlaw birth control either. These are the lies they keep circulating in this effort to distort Donald Trump's positions going into this election. Yesterday, the New York Times confirms that there won't be an immediate winner on election night and that early results could misleadingly suggest a Trump victory. However, the Times says this isn't necessarily a sign of flaws in the process, but rather the results of stronger security measures needed for counting mail-in ballots to protect democracy. Boy, something doesn't smell right there, does it, folks? They can hand count 38 million paper ballots in Florida, but we can't get election results on election night. Again, we're going to be taking your calls in just a minute, so please, that number, 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222. I'm Roger Stone, and I'll be right back to take your questions.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Before I went to law school, I worked for the telephone company and was a card-carrying member of CWA and AFL-CIO. Unions play a powerful...
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back, folks. This is the segment I call the Stone Zone on the phone. This is your chance to call in and, well, the sky's the limit. No obscenity, please, but be happy to take your questions. Let's go to David in New Jersey. David, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger. It's a great privilege to speak with you. As somebody who has been involved in campaigns over the years and was very frustrated over the years to see a lot of people betray our trust, I've always wondered if you could kindly elaborate, if you know. I'm not sure who or whom were the rhinos in question that recommended kinder, gentler be Reagan's running mate in 1980. If I was old enough to vote in 1992, I guarantee I would have voted for Ross Perot, because that entire clan, in my estimation, has destroyed any credibility whatsoever that they may have even had. And I met Pat Buchanan in 2000. I shook his hand, and I deeply regret never voting for him. And thank you, Roger. God bless you and your wife.
Thank you very much. I've written an entire book on this, of course, called The Bush Crime Family. You can find it where books are sold. But this is an interesting question. After Reagan was nominated, I think we had 11 regional political directors. These are the men and women who had worked for 2 years to elect Ronald Reagan. And we were allowed to meet with the candidate. Ed Meese was with him. So was Mike Deaver, his counsel and his chief body man. And as we went around the room, Reagan asked each one, who do you think I should choose for vice president? The majority of those present favored the selection of Congressman Jack Kemp of Buffalo, the upstate conservative congressman. There were a handful of others who were for Senator Paul Laxalt of Nevada, a great, great man. But interestingly enough, there was not a single person who was for George Bush. Then you remember Henry Kissinger came up with this brilliant idea of trying to persuade Gerald Ford to become vice president. And while Reagan was willing to entertain that idea, when Kissinger and Ford started talking about a co-presidency in which maybe we would divide things up, where President Reagan would handle domestic policy, but Vice President Ford would handle foreign policy, Reagan figured out that he was being conned by Kissinger, and he said, no dice. Frankly, I think a campaign of personal assassination and rumor destroyed the candidacy of Jack Kemp. False rumors about his sexuality were spread aggressively by the Bush people. And unfortunately, that got him off the contention list. And then an argument was made by pollster Robert Teeter, who had been George Bush's pollster, but also Jim Baker, who had very skillfully moved from the Bush camp into the Reagan camp to choose George Bush because he would theoretically appeal to suburban moderates. I'll give Bush credit for campaigning extraordinarily hard and helping the ticket. He spent 8 years preparing to run for vice president. You will recall the 1988 convention where he famously says, "Read my lips, no new taxes." Whereupon, after his election, he immediately raised taxes, thus functionally ending Reaganism in the Republican Party until, well, Donald Trump picked that particular torch back up. And that's how it went down. Nancy Reagan and Barbara Bush cordially despised each other. The feeling was not warm between Reagan and Bush after the famous Nashua debate, in which Bush petulantly refused to let the other presidential candidates contend. That's the famous "I paid for this microphone, Mr. Green," or maybe his name was Breen, I was never really sure, moment that galvanized Reagan's reelection. Remember, Reagan lost the Iowa caucuses in an upset, and then he crushed George Bush in New Hampshire, then subsequently crushed him in South Carolina, and then ran away with the nomination in the South. Thank you so much for your question. It was indeed a good one. Tony in Clifton, New Jersey, you're on the Roger Stone Show. Welcome. What is your question?
Hi, Roger Stone. You're my truth teller. And I have to tell you that as we observe President Trump dealing with the debacle with the when he was talking about the pets that were being assaulted by the Haitians, I do need to say I wish President Trump would have mentioned Kamala Harris has a rich history with the Caribbean and also with other countries that are underprivileged. And what's happening in our country is not only, Roger Stone, we pledged $100 million to Haiti, $200 million, the millions that have gone to Haiti under the Green New Deal. And this was for humanitarian aid and Green New Deal things that were in all those bills that we funded, taking all our taxpayer money. And now, Roger Stone, not only have we given them money, we've taken in all their criminals because they have a very high crime rate in Haiti, and they're in the Caribbean, and they're coming here to our country. That needs to come across. Americans are really being taken as fools, Roger Stone. They're taking our money and they're giving us their problems, just like President Trump told us would happen.
Well, we're certainly not imagining the fact that violent Venezuelan gangs are taking over entire neighborhoods in Colorado, in the Bronx, in Chicago. We're not imagining these things. In fact, the policies of the Biden-Harris administration has been one of open borders. She was the border czar. Remember that? Although NBC and ABC are trying to clean that up, claiming that she never had that title. No, she wasn't in charge of that when, in fact, she was. This, to me, is the defining and most important issue in the country. We have over 15 million illegals, at least at this point. And the most disturbing thing is that Harris has made it clear, Chuck Schumer said the same thing, that she wants to make these illegals all U.S. citizens, in which case they will raid Medicare and Social Security, leaving those programs bankrupt and many senior citizens desperate and poor. When in the debate, President Trump was asked about Obamacare, it occurred to me that if we followed Kamala Harris's position that U.S. taxpayers should foot the bill for the full health care of every illegal in the country, well, the truth of the matter is we won't be able to afford health care for anyone. I don't think they can just walk away from their record. But look, now Kamala Harris says she's going to, her words, crack down and seal our border, hiring hundreds of new Border Patrol agents. Where has she been for the last 3.5 years? The Harris border nightmare has resulted in over 600,000 trafficked children, making her and Joe Biden the biggest traffickers of children in world history. This administration, the Biden-Harris administration, lost over 85,000 girls and children who were trafficked into the United States but that number is actually several years old, and the real number is thought to be higher. She also was involved in terminating our program to deport MS-13 gang members, and now directly resettling those M13 gang members across the border into American communities and towns. No, we're not imagining this. This is happening before our very eyes. So I agree totally with you. We should not let Kamala Harris reinvent herself as someone committed to sealing the border. I'll concede that she never had the formal title of border czar, but we've seen the ABC and NBC interviews in which Joe Biden clearly gives her authority and responsibility for our southern border. Jonathan Carroll of ABC has tried to recast that. He's incorrect. I've seen his own report. Thank you, Tony, so much for your call. Going back to the call board here, let's go to Scott in the Bronx. Scott, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Good afternoon, Roger. So briefly, before I get to my point, I just want to make a recommendation with regard to control of the mass media by the left, how it's biased and how it's influencing and detrimentally influencing our political system. There's a documentary. It's called Who Rules America. It's by National Vanguard Books, and it documents the corporations, the Disneys, the Viacons, the Comcasts, etc., the corporate officers, and what their agenda is and how they're clearly biased tendentiously in favor of extreme left-wing ideology. I highly recommend it. It's Who Rules America by National Vanguard Books. Now, to my point, with regard to the recent resignation of Edward Caban in New York City, he's the corrupt police commissioner under Eric Adams, the incompetent bonehead mayor of New York. Now, he exemplifies the nepotism and corruption that's endemic in many blue states and blue municipalities, whereby the police agencies and the court systems are weaponized and politicized against people on the right. Now, he has Caban's resignation and his Caban's alleged criminality has nothing to do with political affiliation, but it just exemplifies that if someone's willing to use the NYPD or any other municipal police agency as a street gang to extort nightclub and bar owners, as Caban's brother was alleged to have done. Now, imagine, what they would do if they were tasked with illegally surveilling or harassing political dissidents because this or that politician told them to do so. So, in other words, the police exist primarily, first and foremost, to serve and protect the politicians, not the public. And when the politicians direct them to do anything to infringe and impugn your civil rights and your civil liberties, the police will do everything the politicians tell them to do, no matter how atrocious. A perfect example of that is the murder of Ashley Babbitt on January 6th by the degenerate in the police, in the Capitol Police Force. He should, instead of collecting his free medical, free dental, and free pension at taxpayers' expense, he should be sitting in prison on a murder indictment for murdering Ashley Babbitt. The police are not your friends. They're not a tacit ally. They're the agents of the executive branch of government, which is clearly not in the interest of the American people. Thank you.
All right. Well, that was a little more of a statement than a question, but we welcome it nonetheless. Look, I give my good friend Sal Greco, who served with distinction for 15 years, I guess, as a New York City police officer, sometimes serving in some of the most dangerous precincts for the midnight graveyard shift, for ferreting out the extraordinary corruption of this administration. I think once they get to the COVID payments to individual businesses, they're going to find a whole another level of corruption. I do want to stress that in our society, in our country, even today, you're innocent and still proven guilty. So at this point, we have allegations. Many say there are sealed indictments. Until that is actually confirmed, we don't know that. But where there is smoke, there is a fire. And we do know that there were specific complaints regarding sex trafficking and drug activity at the Bronx nightclub Consafrito, and for some reason the NYPD did not act on those. Were they given political protection? Curtis Sliwa and Sal Greco have been on this issue, and we're going to be watching it very closely. I thank you for your call. I'm Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show. This is the Stone Zone on the Phone section of our show, and we'll be right back. Remember that number, 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222. We'll be right back to take more of your questions.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
And we're back, folks. I like to read the political tea leaves, and just kind of looking online, I wonder, given the fact that Eric Adams is viewed as being in deep, deep political, if not legal trouble, whether we may be looking at a three-way Republican primary for mayor between John Catsimatidis, media mogul and grocer and businessman who has run before because he loves his city, and Curtis Sliwa, who was the Republican nominee last time, who has been an articulate critic of our current administration in New York City, and Councilman Joe Borelli out in Staten Island. This shows a vibrancy in the party if it's true, and I want to volunteer to moderate a debate if that should come to pass. All right, let's go to Harriet in Brooklyn. Harriet, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Well, thank you so much for taking my call again, Roger. My question is this. Why isn't the great Speaker Johnson investigating Tom Walsh as a Chinese Communist CCP asset? Yesterday, I heard an interview with the author of a new book, Mao's America, and this lady states that we know that he took his high school students to communist China 30 times. He's an ideologue. He is tied to the philosophy of the communist CCP. And why did he have the Chinese consulate, the CCP people, at his inauguration for governorship in Minnesota? Why isn't this investigated? And why did Camilla choose him? Is she a Chinese asset too? This is a very scary thing. This lady states that we will be slaves if this country turns from a constitutional republic to the CCP-dominated country. And thanks, Roger, for taking my call. It needs to be investigated by the Speaker. It needs to be investigated in Congress.
I don't disagree. It's interesting that the Justice Department this week, I think the FBI announced that they would be looking for Russian interference in our election, but they say nothing about potential Chinese interference in our election. All of their claims about Russian collusions, we covered this last weekend. Paul Manafort was giving poll numbers to an emissary of Vladimir Putin, who was a Russian intelligence asset. No, he wasn't. He was giving public data to a man named Konstantin Kilimnik, who was, in fact, sorry, Robert Mueller, a U.S. intelligence asset, as documented by the independent journalist Matt Taibbi. Roger Stone was talking to intelligence assets through direct messages on Twitter. Take a look at them. I released them myself, 28 words, innocuous. And they took place 3 months after WikiLeaks had already published all of the allegedly hacked material from the DNC. Oh, the Russians hacked the Democrat National Committee. No, actually, there's no evidence whatsoever of that. In fact, the FBI admitted they never looked at the servers, and CrowdStrike, the third-party IT firm hired by the DNC, admitted before the House Intelligence Committee under oath that their infamous CrowdStrike report, which was denied to my lawyers during my defense, had no evidence whatsoever of Russian hacking. Oh, the Russians ran a multi-million dollar social media program. It was closer to $40,000, and it was extraordinarily unsuccessful. A drop in the bucket, given the billions that were spent. No, you are absolutely right. There's a great book, Blood Money, by Peter Schweitzer. Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye to China While China Kills Americans. Tried to get him on the show for this weekend. Hopefully we can get him on the show soon. It's an extraordinary book. It really will curl your ears. You have identified the problem. Look, I'm not carrying water for Vladimir Putin. He's a dictator. He's a brutal dictator. I hate all forms of totalitarianism, but China, to me, far more dangerous. And the fact that Tim Walz was on the payroll at a university, at a Chinese communist funded university, teaching there, and the fact that he's visited 30 times, yeah, I do find that fairly disturbing. Thank you so much, Harriet, for calling. Judith in Brooklyn, you've been holding for a while. Welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Hi, Roger. I'd like to share a few things with you, if I may. First off, let's have some conservative moderators, like the next could be two conservative moderators instead of these other kinds, for President Trump for another debate. And then I want to go on to something more important with this debate. For an entire hour and a half, Roger, President Trump was ganged up on, literally ganged up on, by three colluders, as far as I'm concerned. Miss Phony Baloney Fraudster Kamala, that's what I call her, and these two out-of-control moderators. She memorized total lies. I found her so dishonest and so deceitful in all of her answers, Roger. And the two moderators, they were equally dishonest in their so-called fact-checking, the way you said before, for sure. And I have to tell you, President Trump had to go on the defensive, because what was he doing? He was defending the truth and facts to the American public, because they were caught in like 25 lies. It was impossible. And let me point this out to you also, Roger, on the abortion thing. When you heard her talk about, she put on this compassionate act, this fictional story of a 12-year-old bleeding out. Well, guess what? As Senator Kamala Harris, she signed on to late-term abortions, okay? And even if the baby survived, she would have them allow the baby to die. And this has happened over like 130, 140 times where babies have been survived and they have been left to die, okay? And it happened in Minnesota, 8 babies under Walz, okay? So where is her compassion to these helpless live babies that are left to die, Roger? And where is her compassion for so many other things? Where's her compassion for all of the people that have been murdered because she has allowed all these illegals coming across the border for 3.5 years and says nothing? Where's her compassion for the 13 Marines that were murdered unnecessarily in Afghanistan? And where's her compassion for the 31 people murdered when they had those 2020 rioters? And instead, her compassion went to criminals that she raised funds for and bailed out, and on and on. And you know what? She sits there in the debate and goes, I don't want to go back. Sure, she doesn't want to go back. You know why? Because if you go back, you'll see that her record is disastrous. She is a radical, wokeism, CRT, Marxist. She has just created chaos in the 3.5 years now and before. Where's her compassion for the guy that had, she held up DNA from him, proving his innocence? Where's her compassion for anything, okay? She is a dangerous woman, and this other woman's right. Tim Walz, they have to investigate him because the two of them, as far as I'm concerned, they are birds of a feather, except as far as I'm concerned, they're a bunch of vultures. I am so angry at this whole thing, Roger. There's so much going on, and there's so much at stake. And you know something, Roger? Let me share something that Bill O'Reilly said, which I liked. Many people do not like Donald Trump. I do, for good reasons. But if they don't, at least love your children. I didn't say, but I'll say love your children, love your grandchildren. And for the sake of saving this country, hold your nose. And if you want to save America, vote for Trump. Because and by the way, I would love Nikki Haley to also go out there. And if she says also put her mouth where her money is too. She also wants to save the country. Go out there and Trump for President Trump. Everybody has to do that because there's just too much at stake. It's now or never. Thank you.
Thank you. What amazes me is they keep trotting out the endorsement of Darth Vader himself, Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney, the vice president who tricked us into a completely unnecessary war with the false claim that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, who leaned on Colin Powell to testify falsely in the UN that that Iraqis had obtained yellow cake uranium with which to build nuclear weapons. Tens of thousands of Americans died. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis died. Halliburton, which is the company whose stock Dick Cheney had in his blind trust. How blind is your trust if you know what stock's in it? Made $7 billion with a B dollars. Now suddenly they're holding Dick Cheney, a warmonger, a war criminal, in my opinion, out as some kind of model exemplar, only also to trot out the support of John McCain. John McCain's daughter and son criticized Donald Trump for going to Arlington Cemetery at the request and invitation of the 13 Gold Star families, but they don't mention that John McCain himself filmed a TV commercial for his presidential campaign right there in Arlington Cemetery. I see a realignment. I'm happy to trade Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard for Dick and Liz Cheney any day of the week. Thank you so much for your question. Folks, we're about out of time. We appreciate your tuning in to the Roger Stone Show. We particularly appreciate your questions. I want to remind you to go to the 77 WABC app on your phone. So download that app so you can hear us. Also, you can always hear us at WABC.com. Now, stand by for my good friend Joe Piscopo, who will be right along with Sundays with Sinatra.